Well, in lieu of the NBA Finals that ended earlier this week, our history segment for tonight's show will focus on the best NBA teams that never won a championship. We'll break it down by decade, starting in the 1960s through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. Well, to summarize the 1960s, I could only think of one word, and that word is green. The Boston Celtics beat everybody, especially the Los Angeles Lakers, who I honestly thought going around the table, this would be we have a consensus that the Lakers were, of course, the best team to not win the title. They lost the final 6 times, all to the Celtics. 3 of those series were losses to Boston in Game 7. But before we get into that, I'm actually going to kick it back to Ambassador Kenny Ken because he thinks otherwise. He thinks there was a better team. So, Ken, you got to explain this one, man.
Well, the Lakers are always winners in my book. Let's just start there. they're never a runner-up to anybody, especially no motherfucking Celtics.
In the 60s, they were a 60s.
So I am talking about the St. Louis Hawks, who actually, when the 60s started in 1960 and 1961, they lost to the vaunted Boston Celtics. They were led by an NBA legend, Mr. Bob Pettit. And then also Lenny Wilkins came along later on, and the Hawks were a perennial playoff contender through the entire 1960 period, had several division titles, but as we all know, the Celtics
that sounds like that hurt.
were the kingpins of the 60s, and so I felt like the Hawks, particularly Bob Pettit, deserved a shout out as lovable losers during that decade.
So it had nothing to do. You just couldn't pick the Lakers.
No, Bob Pettit. Ask your dad about Bob Pettit.
Well, I picked the Lakers, obviously.
I don't know why the fuck you did that.
I picked the Lakers
they
because
lost 6.
Hey, look. Here's the thing.
We don't celebrate losses at Lance. I mean, Les.
What? His name is Lance for the rest of the show. Hey, Lance.
Hey, look. If you have Jerry, the logo, you have Gail Goodrich and Baylor, and you cannot win a championship. You lose 3 Game 7s in Boston. I mean, they were the best teams.
Yeah, but you didn't talk about the reason. If you have 2 members on your team named Slick Leonard and Hot Rod Hundley, you're not winning. You knew it was the 60s because
in Boston, huh?
Right.
I mean, dude, 6. That's actually fucking impressive. I mean, that's on some Buffalo Bill shit. To get there, obviously,
Here come all the backhanded compliment.
I was about to say, we made up for it.
Ain't no, but we're talking about the 60s right now, and that's all we're talking about. I mean, St. Louis lost 2, Warriors lost 2 in that same decade. They all lost to the same team.
Yeah.
But to go, I mean, poor Elgin.
For real.
I mean,
yes.
I mean that's going to come up a little later.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
But I mean, Kev, Elgin, for real.
Elgin with Jerry West and Wilt and even Happy Hairston. I mean, you had 4 guys giving you 20 or more a night. That 68-69 team that ended up losing in 7 to Boston. But man, y'all didn't think y'all could at least get one of those? I mean, y'all was stacked.
I mean, I wasn't alive.
I
know you think I'm old and all, motherfucker, but I was not alive.
No, Red Auerbach. I mean, Red Auerbach was killing the league. He killed the league for 3 decades almost. And he was he was ahead of his time in terms of just drafting and scouting and being able to keep players. And Boston was that was one of the original sort of home court advantages in sports, period. And so,
he was a
cool.
cold-blooded killer, and back then when people weren't.
But we whipped their ass from 70s on though. So
if you before I kick it back to Ken to go into the 70s, one point I do want to make about the 60s is any basketball fans out there, if you get a chance, please check out that new 30 for 30 Boston and LA Laker rivalry. They go into this era for the first 40 minutes, and it's great, man. Great information, great history, great perspective. So